Our next speaker is John Ballam, who's from the Department of Energy Resources. The Green Communities Act created a new category similar to the Renewable Portfolio Standard called the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard. And it's one of the things that provides financial incentive for the development of combined heat and power, and that's what John's going to tell you about. So, John?
Afternoon. I'm the last. So before I start, I just wanted to recommend to you Becca's services. If you are considering CHP or want to find out more about it, it's an excellent resource, and I hope you will take advantage of it. I'm here to discuss the state. Massachusetts is one of the very few states that has CHP-specific incentives. I think there may be 5 or less at this time. And in Massachusetts, there are 2 major programs. One is associated with the Energy Efficiency Program created by the Green Communities Act, which is administered by the utilities. It was alluded to, in which combined heat and power is a measure under the commercial and industrial C&I 3-year plan, for which a qualifying unit can get up to $750 per kW capacity capital assistance. The other program is the program I'm here to speak about, which is the Alternate Portfolio Standard, which is a state program which is administered by the Department of Energy Resources under the Portfolio Standards Department. There we go. So I'd like to just give you a quick background about the portfolio standards and where the APS fits into those. The policy purpose of it was to ensure the adoption and growth of renewables and efficient and other forms of efficient generation with the ultimate goal of reducing the carbon emission factor for the grid, or greening the grid. The RPS standards, there are 2 of them. There's the Class 1, which is for new post-1997 renewable energy generation, wind and solar. There's the RPS solar carve-out, of which you're probably all familiar with. There's the Class 2, which was for pre-existing renewables. And then there's a new standard, the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard, or the APS as it's fondly known, which supports some other technologies for which the efficiency attribute was recognized as a way of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. There are several technologies in there. Flywheels is one of them, gasification. But the primary technology, which is expected to contribute the most, is combined heat and power. You're probably, are most of you familiar with the portfolio standards and how they work? Yes or no? I'll go over it quickly. The portfolio standards create obligations for the load-serving entities to procure electricity kilowatt hours sold to customers from generators from specific technologies, some of them being renewable, and in the case of the alternate portfolio standard, one of them is being combined heat and power. A schedule has been set up for a percentage of the load forecasted for the year, and it's an increasing schedule. I'll go over that with you. A rate is set for a maximum ceiling price, and then I guess that really doesn't cover it. And then the mechanism is simple. Meters, the systems are metered. Meters are read. Meter readings are converted into alternate energy credits, and I'll go over how that's done. Those credits are then submitted to the NEPOOL Generation Information System. If they are then approved, the NEPOOL converts those into certificates, which are market instruments, which then are purchased at market value by the load-serving entities in order to fulfill their obligation. If there are not enough of those credits in order to fulfill our obligation, there's an alternate compliance path for them where they can pay a set price, which started out at $20 a megawatt hour, and then increases with the inflation index. I believe at this time it's about $21 a megawatt hour. And I caution you, that's not a megawatt hour of electricity. That's a megawatt hour of fuel savings, of fuel energy savings, and I'll go over that with you in this slide. So the APS and AICS are a quantification of the efficiency gains of CHP versus obtaining electricity from the grid and thermal energy from a conventional thermal conversion unit, such as a boiler. This has been covered somewhat already in the discussion, obviously because CHP recovers heat that would normally be exhausted to the atmosphere or to water doing with no useful purpose. Its efficiency is greater than you get from grid supplied electricity. That is expressed in the formula which you see there at the bottom, which is the formula by which meter readings are converted into alternate energy credits. Basically what you have here is you're comparing, the first term is the amount of the megawatts of electricity generated in a quarter is read off a meter, divided by 0.33, which we consider to be a good average value for the efficiency of the grid at delivering power to the point of use. So that's the efficiency, the heat rate of the power plants, the average heat rate of the power plants, minus the losses in the transmission and distribution system. So that is the fuel that it would take in order to produce that electricity from the grid. The second term is the amount of fuel that it would take in order to produce the thermal energy recovered, supplied by the combined heat and power system if you were using a boiler or other conventional thermal conversion system, minus the fuel that you actually consumed in producing the electricity and the thermal energy by the combined heat and power system. If the difference is positive, you've saved fuel. For every megawatt hour of fuel you save, you get a credit. Typically, for a good running CHP system, the ratio of megawatt hours of electricity generated to AICS is about 1.5. So you get about 1.5 times the number of AICS as you read off your meter in megawatt hours. That's a little bit counterintuitive, so, but that's the way it works. So we've already talked a bit here about CHP benefits, so I'll go over that quickly. Obviously, there's for the end user, there's the cost savings from the basically generated by the what's called the spark spread, greater control over facility energy costs, increased reliability, which Becca and is covered and Bob covered. To the grid operator, it's helpful to them because it takes load and demand off the existing grid. Climate change and societal. Typically for a natural gas-fired CHP unit running at about a 75% overall thermal efficiency, you're looking at about 17 to 20% net source gas GHG reduction, which is quite significant. And then in terms of societal, for many of our energy-intensive industries, it can really help them control the cost of energy, which can be an important part, important cost in their production. I mentioned the schedule. This is the schedule of obligations, the increase in obligations through 2020. At this time, there is no sunset on it. You can see the number of megawatt electrical capacity that correlates to the increase in AICs. That is assuming, this assumes a certain range of performance, but it's probably fairly accurate. Guidelines for eligibility, new systems, they have to have started operations after January 1st. Existing systems, there is a program to support existing systems, but it's only on an incremental basis, i.e., if there has been a significant incremental addition in load or capacity for the system, that portion of it can then be eligible for AICs. An example of that would be, an example of the first would be if a campus adds a new facility, a new load, and they need to increase the capacity, say add another steam turbine or add another gas turbine, an HRSG, that portion, the energy produced by that portion would be eligible for AICs. The guidelines for APS-eligible CHP systems, obviously this is a production-based incentive. You get what you earn, and the way that it is determined of what you earned is by meters. So for any eligible system, the fuel, electricity, and BTUs of useful heat have to be metered, and the meters have to meet requirements that we have set forth in our guidelines, which you can obtain online. The specifications for which you can obtain online. The meter reading and computation, they're done by independent verifiers to maintain arm's length. And the only other restriction is that CHP projects, unlike RPS projects, must serve, the thermal load must be in Massachusetts. As I said before, CHP units can also qualify for the utility efficiency, energy efficiency funding, and you would, of course, be well advised if you're planning to get early, very early, with your utility representative so you avoid being considered a free rider. Here's an example of a fairly typical CHP system that we see in our program, a 500 kW unit that is running with a capacity factor of 0.8. That's 7,000 hour full load hour, 7,000 full load run hours a year, and with an electric efficiency of a 0.33, which is a little high. Overall thermal efficiency of 0.75, and a value per AIC at $17, which is actually rather conservative. I think right now the market price is more like 19. That will earn, running this way, that will earn roughly $94,700 per year. Just coincidentally, that works out to about 2.7 to 3 cents a kilowatt hour, and that coincidentally is about right mid-range for the normal price range of maintenance for many engines and many CHP units. So one way of looking at this is that this program almost fully subsidized the maintenance cost over the lifetime maintenance cost of a CHP system, and that doesn't matter whether it's a 75 kW system or a 15 megawatt CHP system. Here's some examples. How am I doing on time? Get it going. Okay. Here are some examples which you can look over at your leisure of how this scales, and then the kind of systems the type of systems would progress through the size capacity. Here's a look at what what our program has achieved so far in terms of capacity and the breakdown. As you can see, academic, we have several large universities and colleges enrolled with some fairly large systems, UMass being the largest. Manufacturing is healthy. Hospitals, I think, will be a growing sector. And other are a lot of small systems, a lot of them which are aggregated. If you looked at this the other way around in terms of numbers, it would practically reverse itself. There are more small systems, obviously, than there are large systems. The total runs right now at 61.7 megawatts, which is pretty good. Performance through September 11, these systems generated roughly 357,000 megawatt hours, and of electricity, about 1.2 million MMBTU of thermal. That's equivalent to, I'm sorry, that's not generated. That's the savings, excuse me. That was the fuel savings. I misspoke. And that's equivalent to 160,000 55-gallon barrels of heating oil. In terms of net CO2 source emission reduction, about 46,000 short tons. That's about 8,850 cars for a year, removing that many cars for a year. So fairly significant. The future, in the small end, we see an encouraging increase in participation, particularly in aggregations. In the mid-range, we're seeing a steady growth. And in the larger units, we have, as I show here, one rather large project in the feasibility stage, another on the horizon. Some events or scenarios which could significantly increase the rate of aches being generated, which we would hopefully have. So new or incremental use of byproduct heat generated by utility-scale power plants, essentially use of condenser water, condenser return water, possibly to heat commercial greenhouses or to supply water to heat pumps for distributed energy systems. A reduction or elimination of any remaining utility standby tariffs, the major one being the NSTAR that's surviving, or now the Northeastern Utilities. A solution of technical barriers to the interconnection of CHP systems that are served by area or spot distribution networks, that's much of Boston, and a growth of partnerships between investors, lenders, developers, and end users, which will allow the benefits and costs of CHP to be distributed over a wide base. That's really it's a rather broad statement, but that's really one of the major barriers that we're having right now is financial. And I appreciate your attention.